So folks may continue to roll in. We are going to get started. We have a beautiful plan for the day, so I'm going to jump us right in. Are folks seeing this slide? And I do want to introduce to everyone my longtime colleague and dear friend, Sarah Filoni, who's here with me representing the AMI team, is helping out with Zoom production today. Sarah's a good friend and colleague of many years, friend of my dad. Sarah, thank you for doing this.
So happy to be here.
Appreciate it. So here we are. This is one of our creativity experiences. You'll know during the pandemic, we've developed a few different types of programming. We have our regular virtual gatherings with BBWIs. We have our creativity experiences. And then we have our creative problem solving sessions when we really dig deep on behalf of another organization's challenge, like we did with Eldera last year. So this is a creativity experience. We're thrilled that we can have this time together. It's focused on the psychology of book writing. And I wondered as we got started, as if folks might just chime into the chat with something from your summer reading list that you particularly enjoyed. So, and we will of course publish this to everyone. So I'm typing mine in, but can give us a good strong book of list of books to read. So type into the chat with something from your summer reading list that you particularly enjoyed. Oh yeah, Jenny, Where the Crawdads Sing, so good. Fox and I, Bittersweet. Look at this variety of books. This is awesome. Jane bringing us poetry. Thank you. Awesome. So we will make sure to circulate this list and all have the opportunity to connect with and enjoy the range of books that this community has absorbed this summer. Thank you so much. And so here we are on the topic of the psychology of book writing. We have a community that's made up of many accomplished authors. And as we get started, I just wanted to offer a moment for reflection. So just give you a moment to read this quote. So this quote came to me as a gift this morning. Dave Krepko, you want to say a few words? This was a magical connection.
Well, my sister-in-law sent me this. It's synchronicity. I guess she didn't know I had this session or it was about writing or anything, but she knows I'm trying to write a book. But I just thought it was so deep that we could sit down to write something and get so caught up in the, I don't know, the nuts and the bolts of it sometimes that we don't get into the soul of it. So it really reminded me to go deeper, and as I attempt to write, I hope it speaks to others on this session.
Thank you, Dave. This was a great thing to find in my inbox this morning, and I knew immediately that it would be a way into this conversation today, so thank you. And Dave, I believe, Jenny, was Dave in part the spark for this session?
Yes, we had gotten off our conversation about what we could do in August, I think 2 days prior to a one-on-one conversation I had with Dave where he was talking with me about writing a book. And so it was kind of like they came together right at the exact same moment. It was perfect.
Awesome. And I do want to also at this point acknowledge and thank Jenny. Jenny took a strong leadership role as an AMI board member in envisioning, designing, and coordinating this entire session. So the experience we're about to have today has been kind of created by Jenny. Jenny, thank you.
You're welcome.
So As we jump in, we have an opportunity to hear from and be with another member of the AMI community, Jane Hilberry, a poet. And Jane, when I think about you, you know, I always think about you joining us remotely in LA and reading a poem. And how you were so big on the screen, and we received your poem. It was so beautiful. And we're thrilled to be with you today. You did a creativity experience for us not so long ago, and we just welcome you to open our time together today.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and excited about this subject. So I'm going to lead us off in an opening exercise. And I just want to say a bit about the source of the exercise. Another one of my colleagues is a writer and brilliant teacher named Felicia Chavez, and she's written a book that's called the Anti-Racist Writing Workshop. And she and I actually did a positive turbulence conversation together with Rob and Karen that is going to be coming out on the podcast in September. And I would highly recommend, just because she is such a thoughtful, interesting person, that you tune into that when it appears on the Positive Turbulence podcast website. So this is one of her exercises that we're going to do today. She's very interested in anti-racist pedagogy and in making sure that everyone in the classroom really has a voice in what they do. Okay, I think we can take down the slide. Can we? Thank you. So here's what we're going to do. I want everybody to think about a book you would like to write, or maybe one that you're already in the process of writing. And I'll give you an option here if you're not actually thinking about writing a book. But first, let's pause for a minute. Some of you are probably here because you're already in the process of writing a book. Some of you are probably here because there's something that you've always thought you wanted to write about and maybe haven't started or don't know how to go about it. So this is just a way to get us through that maybe first psychological barrier when it comes to writing a book. So think about a book that you'd like to write. And, you know, if you haven't really thought about this before, you might think, oh, you know, what's an area that you have a lot of expertise in that you would really like to share with other people? Or maybe there's like a story that you would love to see in a book for your kids or your grandkids or something like that. So just if there's a book idea floating around, think about that. If not, think about something else that's a passion project that you really would love to do, but maybe haven't figured out how to jump into yet. You know, maybe it's you've always wanted to start a school garden or something, but you haven't done that yet. Okay, so what I'd like you to do, thinking about this book, is to make a list of all the fears, great and small, that you have about writing this book or starting this project. So I might be like I'm thinking, okay, I'll just give you a real example. I'm thinking about writing a book that combines text like poems and images, so visual stuff that I have made myself. So some of my fears would be like, I'm not an artist, and people who are artists will look at this and judge it. I don't know enough about the history of how text and image work together. It feels too vulnerable to let people see how I draw, right? So whatever those things are, I'm not going to have time to do it once I'm back to work, right? Whatever those fears are, just make a list of them. Okay, so let's just take a few minutes right now and just brainstorm. And you'll choose what, if anything, from this list you want to share. So I encourage you just to be super honest and write everything that feels like it's a fear that's creating an obstacle for you. Is that clear? Okay, let's just take a couple minutes and do this, maybe 2-3 minutes. Okay, take just a minute to finish up whatever fear thought you are on right now. All right, see if you can find a stopping point. So the next step of this is that we're going to write some statements using what you've just written down as fears as the first part. It's funny because I was saying those when I was trying to think of my example. I was like, what really are my fears about this book? And then as soon as I started writing it, I was like, oh, okay, here are the real fears, right? So my first one was, I'm afraid I don't have enough to say anymore, right? What we're going to do is look through your list of fears. If you have a lot of them, then choose, maybe top 2 that have the most energy or seem like they're the biggest obstacles, and actually write out a statement. We're going to call these our affirmations, where you say, like I'll say, I'm afraid I don't have enough to say anymore, but I'm going to write anyway. Okay, so you're going to complete the sentence with an affirmation that you're going to go ahead and do it. And it's important to actually physically write it down. Okay, is that clear? So take a minute and just physically write out a few of these. Maybe I would say at least 2.
It looks like Jim asked to just repeat that instruction. So
Okay,
if you have, after your list of fears that you've written, you want to complete that sentence with the line that you're going to do it anyway. So you have a complete sentence
Right.
with the affirmation at the end.
right. I'm afraid I don't have enough time to work on a book, but I will write it anyway. I will work on it anyway.
And do that for just a couple, right, Jane?
Yeah, just a couple of them. Okay, so we're going to move into breakout rooms right now. And what I'd like you to do is to look at your affirmations that you wrote out. And if there's one of them, and maybe you'll have time for more than one, but at least one that you feel comfortable sharing with other people, you'll do that when you get into your breakout group. And Danielle or Jenny or someone will give us a little more instruction about what we're doing.
Thanks, Jane. So we're going to get into the breakouts. Just briefly introduce yourselves. You'll find yourself in a room probably with 4 AMI community members. You'll share your affirmation statement, so one of the ones that you wrote, and then sort of the project that's behind that. So you'll go around and do that. Jane, anything to add there?
No, but just that I think our fears are often pretty common. So I would say don't hesitate to really share what those real things are that feel like obstacles.
And you'll have 15 minutes of just recognizing you just have a few minutes each. Make sure you get around to everyone. So Sarah, are we ready to go?
We are. You should see a button to join your breakout room.
Welcome back. Welcome back, folks. The rest of your colleagues should be zooming back in here. Here they come. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. So just as we come back from our breakouts and transition here, would love to invite you to chime again into the chat, this time if you're comfortable, to share one of your affirmations. So a fear that you turned into an affirmation, we'd love to encourage folks to share those in the chat. So if you're comfortable sharing the affirmation that you discussed in your, or shared and discussed in your breakout, please do so in the chat. And as those are rolling in, I am going to introduce a friend to AMI, who many of you know, who has been a member of our community for a long time, Chris Ernst. And Jane, by the way, thank you. As these are rolling into the chat, I invite you to kind of see what's coming in there, Jane. And if you want to make any closing comments, we'll come back to that. So thank you. But while y'all are typing in the chat, I want to take this moment to introduce, reintroduce Chris to our community. Chris is the Chief Learning Officer at Workday. Chris is a friend of AMI's for many years. Was at Center for Creative Leadership with my dad, and has just been around AMI for how long now, Chris, do you think?
Oh, I mean, like, you know, 25 years. I remember being like a post grad first year working at CCL and seeing these AMI people walking around Greensboro, and like, what is this about? Who are these people? That happened 25 years ago, probably.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we're so pleased for you to be with us today. And in a moment, Jenny is going to lead a fireside chat with Chris. And so Chris is an author. He'll share a little bit about the book that he wrote and is willing to kind of break down that process, that creative process, reflect on that with us and share the experience. And so Jenny's going to lead that discussion. And as she does, and as Chris reflects on his process as an author and in writing a book, I really want to invite others all of us in the community to remain active in the chat as you hear the questions, as you hear the conversation unfolding, sharing your experience, perspectives, ideas, and connections. There are many authors in this group. And then also just to note, we've reserved 15 minutes on the back end for the group to open up and ask questions of Chris. So we'll give Jenny and Chris the floor for about 30 minutes to explore this, and then we'll open it up to questions. I know you've spotlighted them, Sarah, but I do want to come back to you, Jane. I've just been trying to see if some of the affirmations have rolled into the chat, if anyone was willing to share. Jane, is there anything you want to reflect just as we close this opening? Maybe we could spotlight Jane for a second, Sarah. Oops, you're muted, Jane, sorry.
Yeah, I would just say that these all resonate as very sort of common universal fears. You know, we're not alone in these fears and doubts and obstacles. And the biggest thing that I would say is that doubt is a huge part of the writing process for most people. And just acknowledging and accepting that is important. You know, if you wait until you're sure that you can do it and that it's going to go well and someone's going to read it, it'll never happen. So I think just being able to live with doubt is part of it.
Awesome. And Jane, I can't help it. I got to look at the chat just as you were reflecting. Mary McBride, you're always creating these cliffhanger chat entries. If it's a rabbit hole, I need to make friends with the rabbits. Hey, say a word, Mary. What's going on there? You have to come off mute. Oops, you're muted, Mary.
I think everybody could speak to this, certainly the poets in the room. time matters when you're living a real life. And when you're hanging out with your creative self, she or he seems to be working with a different understanding of what hours and minutes and seconds mean. The tea often burns through the kettle, and your relationships disappear, your dogs die. That's what I mean.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So with that, Jane, thank you for leading us through a thoughtful opening and entry into this discussion. I hope folks enjoyed the chance to connect and share your affirmations. I'm going to hand over, and you'll see them spotlighted, to Jenny and to Chris for a reflective fireside chat. I might encourage you, if you like to have the full fireside experience, in the top right, you can shift from view gallery view to view speaker view, and you'll be immersed in the firelight setting with Jenny and Chris. So Jenny, please take it away.
All right. So I would love to just add a little bit to Danielle's introduction. I had some similar items about Chris's resume and such, and that he was nice enough to share this case with me from the Harvard Business School. I had a publication about him last year, and in it, he had a number of people in his life interviewed, and it was just a fascinating read. And in part of it, Chris was asked to describe himself. And he said, if I were to spend my whole life on a desert island, I wouldn't even have the first words to describe my life. I wouldn't know if I was tall or funny or rude. I only had any sense of who any of us are. Who am I in relationship to others? And only by being exposed to outside of the echo chambers of life do I get a richer, more fuller understanding of what really matters. This is why I purposely went from academia to corporate to nonprofit to philanthropy at the Gates Foundation, to East Coast, to West Coast, to Asia and Europe for a number of years, to experience of growing up with an adoptive brother from Mexico, to having a sister who came out of the closet, even though I'm a white, educated, tall male. After reading this, the resume seemed a little bit less important for me to speak about today.
I totally agree.
My personal opinion of Chris is that he's honorable, intelligent, and humble. And I watch and learn from him every single time I'm in his company. So I hope all of you enjoy what he has to offer and take time to reflect on your own offering, your own true north when it comes to what's important in life. So with that, Chris, I'd love to just duck into a number of questions that we have for today about your personal book writing experience. And given that we had the introduction about fears in particular, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to launch with that and just learn from you about what were your greatest fears when writing your books.
Yeah, sure. And first of all, I just have to say, it is so great to see everybody, so many familiar faces and new faces. I'm like flooded with moments and experiences and conversations and stories, seeing everybody. So let the stories continue. So Jenny, this is the one, I did know, you let me know that this question, can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
My kid is busting in the room saying, I have a question. I'm talking to him and you at the same time. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah. So I knew this question was coming. I knew that we were going to open up with fears, and it's very interesting. I wrote down 3 fears, and then I called up my co-author for the boundary spanning book. Her name is Donna. And I said, hey, I'm going to do this group with AMI. I want to ask you a question. What were your 3 big fears, for this project? And incredibly, they were very, very similar. And I think they're also very similar to a lot of what we saw in the chat. So the first one was a massive case of imposter syndrome. Who am I? Who are we, to take on this endeavor? A wise person gave us some really good a way of thinking about that. Is the way you need is it's not to say that you have the audacity to write a book. It's not to say that you are any smarter or any better than anyone else. But what it is to say that I am more damned committed and determined about this topic than just about most other people on the planet. So it really reframed everything in a way that, yeah, I am actually very committed and stubbornly determined to this topic. And so that was one fear. Another was, it was interesting, Donna said the same thing to me that I wrote down to myself, is living up to my co-author's expectations. For anyone who's done collaborative work, and we all have, the intimacy of a book, as we saw in that opening quote, is real, and to know that that I was living up to the expectations of Donna, and she said the exact same thing, that she had that concern when we started with that project. And then the third one, to Mary's point about the darn rabbit holes, is the fear of not being the right time. And Donna was going through her 10-year process. She was up for 10 years. She had a newborn. Everything was swirling around her. I was moving back from Asia at the time, had 2 small kids. And so I think what I took away, Jane, from your, the exercise, we looked at our fears and we talked about in the small groups, that we're all in good company on this, right? I mean, I think we're all in good company. We all have feelings of, am I, really worthy of this? Will I live up to the expectations of others? Do I really have the time? We're all in good company here. And so I think that's these fears are real, but I think it's also encouraging to know that we're amongst friends with some of these bugaboos.
Mhm.
When you say, is it the right time? And you were talking about, is it the right time for you personally? But what I thought you were going to go to is it the right time for the community to receive what you have to say? And I don't know if in your response you're specifically talking about boundary spanning leadership, but one thing I noticed when we were talking is you said it was a multi-year project, but that book seemed to emerge right in the middle of when that conversation was happening in the corporate world. So I'd love to know more from you about kind of like how you were creating that initial idea and how it spawned for you and when and how that process worked.
Yeah, the origin story. Well, actually, truth be told, it was a decade in the making. So you'd like to be able to say, oh, you got that timing just right. But pure, that's more luck than anything else. And the origin story was, the project was originally, it was a project, it was called Leadership Across Differences, reconciling gender, religion, age, culture, and ethnicity at work. The project started in November of 2001. I was at the Center for Creative Leadership, and the project was a big investment that CCL made as a response to 9/11. It was a question, what can CCL help do as a response to 9/11 in terms of the opportunity of work to be a place of reconciliation around the intractable issues. And so in the 10-year project, and it was an interview-based project in part, and the interview had one simple question, which was, tell us about a time in which 2 or more demographic groups had to work together to accomplish a shared goal, and they experienced challenge or struggle or hardship in being able to accomplish that goal together. And we would go to South Africa, and we would hear stories about Black and white South Africans in a post-apartheid bank in Johannesburg. Or I spent months traveling around India and would hear stories about different castes having to work together in a nonprofit, a child relief organization in India. But we would hear stories as we would interview people around, it's the darn engineering teams and the sales teams aren't communicating in a tech company in France. And we'd say, no, we're not interested in that. And then they would tell us another story about the senior managers up here and the people on the line in a pork processing plant in rural North Carolina. And we just decided we had to, to listen, to really listen to the stories that we were hearing in 18 different countries, around the world on 5 continents. And we came to finally realize is that all of these stories are stories about identity and about this very human need to create these conditions of us and them. And Jenny, a little bit in that quote that you read, the only way that we know who we are, if we lived on a desert island, we would have no idea. We wouldn't even begin to have any words to describe our values or who we are. It's only through relationships that we form a sense of self. And the deep irony of that is that we know who we are by being members of different groups that reaffirm who we are and shared values and shared purposes. But we also, paradoxically, by not being a part of other groups. And so what we really came to see is that a lot of human history, whether it's tribal or whether it's political or whether it's demographic or cultural, or whether it's about being the identity of being an engineer or the identity of being a senior manager, that these stories were all about basically stories about who we are. And that was the beginning of this whole idea, this concept of what we call boundary spanning, right? That was really the origin story. And I had a colleague in Singapore. I was living there at the time. His name is Jeff Yip, and we did a white paper. We just started with a small project, a white paper. We called it boundary spanning, and we found out it really resonated. We knew we were onto something. And I think the rest is history from there. But I think that the takeaway is I think when we thought we were doing something over here, and we realized we're actually doing something that's all over here. And so to not fall too in love with your initial ideas, because you have to be open to where it's going to take you might be somewhere very different than where you thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the when you talk about not kind of being too committed to the initial thought. It's one particular challenge I think a lot of people have. If you think about your 10-year journey through this process, what were the biggest challenges that you were facing, and some thoughts about how you were overcoming them along the way?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'll be brutally honest with, the first one is like, and Andrew Bennett, your comment I think really got it for me. Is like every sentence, every word feels like the moment of truth. Like it's so that challenge of this is the moment to really now commit to what I think about this concept or this idea or this thought. So Andrew, I think you spoke to the same thing with the fear of something along the lines of I won't be able to get the words out in the way that I want to in that moment. And for someone like myself, and I think it's true for a lot of us in this community, like I'm very comfortable in that nebulous ideation space. That's a very comfortable place to be. And writing is a discipline that really requires you to get clear with yourself on what it is that you really believe about that certain sentence at that particular moment. So that's a challenge. I felt like I'm constantly discovering what it is. What I think that opening quote, what it is, discovering what lives within us. So you're discovering that over and over and over again. What lives within us. I love that opening quote. Another challenge for me personally, I'll just again being really honest, is making things concrete. I'm also very comfortable in the abstract world. I can have struggles with, you know, the famous, the music that I hear in my mind, and how to convey that in a way that the listeners of that music can hear it with me. And so I think one of the ways that I dealt with that particular challenge was I also love stories and storytelling. And so the book finding ways to compensate for our weaknesses, for my weaknesses or challenges, was tell a lot of stories in the book, and that stories transcend context and cultures and make things real for people. So that was a challenge I had. And then a third, I'd say too, is just, you know, let's be honest, personal sacrifice. I live a very active, involved life, and that spills out over many different, you know, dimensions of terrain. And I think book writers can be pretty boring people, you know. At the time that they're doing it, you know, I was pretty one-dimensional for a good, you know, year and a half or 2 years writing it. Like that's what I had to offer to the conversation. You know, what are you doing? What are you working on? What's going on? And so that personal commitment, I think, if we have broad ranging interests, was a sacrifice, you know, some of the sacrifices for that.
You had to have something that was like keeping you going and giving you that kind of boost of inspiration, given that it was such a long kind of, I mean, I don't know how, honestly, I've never written a book. I don't know how long it typically takes it, but I would guess 10 years is like above average, right? So did you have sources for inspiration that you constantly went back to make sure that you kept going?
Yeah. It was 8 years of research and incubation, and 2 years of writing, a little less than that of writing. Well, you know, and I was even hoping my wife Winifred could just pop on for a quick second and say hello to folks. She would be the number one source of inspiration. So, you know, the book was dedicated to her, and you know, the idea that two of us together, we can do anything, including writing a book. So that would be the first thing I'd mention. I think it's really important to have an honest discussion with your partners, your spouses, your business associates, you know, when taking on a project like this, to sort of have that discussion before, you know, you're in the throes of it. I think, so Winifred, first and foremost, having a co-author was just so invaluable, like one person who truly did understand, you know, and to be able, I think having a co-author is just as much about having two minds in terms of the content as it is about having two hearts that are invested in the project and be able to go on that emotional journey with you. And that applies to not just books, but to any creative endeavor that we're doing, right? It's not just about the content, but it's about not just about heads, but hearts and so forth, and being able to go on that journey together. And then Jenny, I think, you know, when you ask about being motivated to sustain that journey for that time, is I thought of it that 10 years, and I called it this was my magnificent obsession, my MO. And I've heard this expression before. It's true. All writers write about their own shit. You know, that you write your own, and that's what motivates you. It's something, you know, it's something you're working out, or something you're trying to figure out, or something that you feel needs to get resolved. And so we write not just out of our strengths, we write not just out of our gifts and our talents, our light, but I think we also write out of our gaps and our shortcomings and our shadow and dark side. Like there's something that compels us to really, you know, to dig deep into these types of projects. So we want answers to our own unresolved, you know, questions. And I think that's true for most create creative projects, right? And I've always been deeply invested in this idea of intersections, of where things collide. And it's so that those intersections is where new value creation comes. It's where new creativity comes. It's where when cultures collide or products collide or cuisine or whatever it may be. But so often we get something less than the sum of its parts, right? And so how to help leaders and teams and organizations get the most out of where things are colliding, and to be able to create new opportunities out of those zones was something I wanted to really dig into with everything that I had. So I think having an itch is really important to that source of inspiration and motivation.
I want to take one from the audience here. We hadn't discussed this, but I think it's such a good question. Is when you're going through this process, I mean, I read in your case too, like I think you journal every day. You're a very reflective sort of individual. So along that journey, did you find that you had specific things that you were learning about yourself that were very specific to the book writing process? Like your own reflections about that?
Yeah, that's great. I do. I have I think the same black journal I've been using for nearly 27 years now, that I use every day. And I guess there are two things I came to appreciate really that just would immediately pop to mind with that question, Jenny. So one was I always have been fascinated in leadership, but I never had any desire to necessarily be a leader. And in writing that book and hearing those stories is when I sort of recognized that I am a leader of people. And so my career path since that book came out has been very different than it was before. And I didn't know that. I didn't have that awareness until that project. Pretty interesting, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think another is how I had a way of understanding why in my life it's been so important to me to expose myself to differences, and that opening quote that you read, I didn't know you were going to dig that up. That was a nice surprise, but that really captured about that. If I believe, and I do, that I only know who I am in relationship to others, the more that I'm personally exposed to different organizational sectors, people, contexts, the more rich my experience will be and the more rich I will be as a human being. So definitely the book really came to really internalize a value system, a value that's really important to me. And it's really interesting because the idea, especially every book's different. Some, if it's a memoir or if it's a fiction book, it is deeply subjective. But when you're writing a book like this one, which is based on 10 years of research, I'm a psychologist by training. You're taught, the scientific method and objectivity, but also appreciating it. At the end of the day, it's a deeply personal, thing. So that, that trade-off between objectivity and subjectivity, I think, played out throughout the project too in that way.
I have to ask, so I don't even think you know this, Chris, but when I read this book, I was at the very beginning of my experience at Syngenta, and I worked with a vendor to create a training in our organization called cross boundary leadership, something like that, like very, very, very close. And a big portion of what we talked about was paradox. And I know that that was focused on in the book, it was focused on in our course, and it struck me that there are a lot of kind of paradoxes that authors must go through. And when I was thinking about this, I thought about, you know, your desire to belong to this writing community, yet have something unique. You know, your desire to teach, but then as you're reflecting about learning. And so I'm just curious if there is a paradox that you found worth exploring, you know, when you were in this process as an author.
Interesting. Well, it's full of paradoxes, isn't it? Right. I mean, I think the objective and subjective, no doubt, like we somehow put a book as like a statement of truth. And so there's this sort of sense of objectivity to it, but the honest truth is the power of a book or most creative acts is, you know, like is you have access to the great, you know, great minds and thinkers of all times throughout history, and you know, like that's an amazing thing to pick up a book and see what a Greek philosopher was thinking about, you know, all those centuries ago, and there you have that access to that moment in time. So I think the paradox that is like occurring for me right now is the public and the private, and that book writing is a very private act done for a very public means. That is accessible through generations. So that's an interesting paradox, I think.
I like that one. It makes me think of like Glennon Doyle and the authors who are extremely vulnerable about what is going on in their lives, and kind of next to this kind of book that, you know, is more interview based and you know, a lot of data, but I can't imagine what she must go through when I read her stuff. I'm like, I would not have done that. So also, just along the path that you took, were there any sort of significant moments that you can share with us, just moments in time, crucible moments, anything that jumps out at you that would be worth sharing with this group?
Well, I mean, the thing that immediately pops to mind, and it was actually, because this is probably the best story I've got on this one. So, but it was actually, you know, after the book, it was right after the book came out. And maybe a few of you know some version of this story, but, and I'll tell you, like, the moral of it is that you're guaranteed when you're taking on a project like this, that it will open some door that you never thought, you know, possible. So it's a story about the unexpected, but, so right after it came out, I got a request to go to Colorado Springs. Center for Creative Leadership has an office there, and it was to meet with General Lloyd Austin. And that might be a name that's familiar to some of you, that Lloyd Austin is now our current Secretary of Defense in the Biden administration. And at the time, General Austin, he was the incoming general in Iraq, in a mission in Iraq. He was taking over for General Odierno, and he had read the white paper, and he wanted to discuss how the boundary spanning ideas applied to the mission in Iraq. And so we spent a half day together and had a great conversation. Some of you maybe have been to the Colorado Springs campus. It's a beautiful campus. I remember walking to the door, waving goodbye. And it was sort of like that Billy Crystal moment in Princess Bride, you know, where he says, you know, have fun storming the castle. like it was like I watched them off on their way, knowing, you know, that they were on their way to Iraq. And then no more than 2 weeks later, a CCL team, including myself, got a formal request to join the general and the U.S. ambassador to Iraq in the theater. And he was, very clear that the Department of State and Department of Defense are very much like Venus and Mars. They're very different cultures and identities, and they had to work together in different ways to create what he called, and it's like a team of teams to accomplish the mission, and wanted this CCL team to come spend time with both organizations to help them think about cross-boundary leadership and how they could lead more effectively together. And then in the call, they then debriefed us on what it would mean to be entering into a war zone, and started walking through the protocols of wearing full military gear, and that we would be transported by Black Hawk helicopters from different sites, and so I got off the call, and so this, in terms of crucible moment, I thought, well, there's no way I'm, going to do this. I'd love to say I was, more courageous in that moment, but Winifred was like, well, let's take a long walk and talk about it, and she asked, this question about, well, if not this, why else did you spend the past 10 years doing this project? And she was absolutely right, and I think that that was the most, the impact of that work had a significant impact on the outcomes that happened in an environment where, for me, the story is not about what we think about the merits of that time in US history or the Iraq War at all. I certainly have strong views about that. But it is a story about making ourselves available to what might come when we take on a project like this. I'd never in a million years could have imagined something like that happening. And that when we commit ourselves to I committed myself to this project, it opened up a door and avenues that I never imagined. And so there's good unknown returns for the hardships that you put into the in the front end, I think, is the sort of the moral of that story.
My goodness. Totally unexpected, I'm sure. Thank you. We just have a minute before we're about to open up for our 15 minutes of questions. But before we do, I just want to give you any opportunity to offer any last words of advice as an author to your colleagues here at AMI. Yeah, and let's see, we can pick this up in the discussion too. But we all have a book within us, right? Or more than one, or Jenny, I know you talked about an app that you have. We all have an app in us, or whatever it might be, but we have to kind of to make the call eventually, right? And I think a really powerful question to ask ourselves is, how would I feel if it's never written? And to really really sit with that question. And if you sit with that question and you have a sense of peace about it, it's probably not something that you probably need to do. Like if you're, but if you sit with that question and it leaves you unresolved or with a sense of burning, it probably is, and so I think that's a real good moment of truth question about how would I feel if it's never written, if it's never done. So maybe we can dig into that a little bit more. Who knows? Absolutely. Oh, so we can go into a mode where I'm not so big on this to open it up for questions. And we have Danielle, are we at time where we still have 15 minutes?
Yeah, we have a little less, but we'll roll with it and enjoy the time and make it work. This is terrific. Chris, thank you. What an opportunity to climb into your magnificent obsession that time in your life, and have you explore all the corners, sort of walk around through that experience with us and share it. So thank you. And I just want to acknowledge that the chat was incredibly active. We'll share it with you as well. We'll share it with everyone. A lot of what was coming up in the chat was people really lit up by your conversation around boundaries, and then moving that into concepts of frontiers and what happens on the edges and on the margins. So a lot of discussion there. In addition to reacting to your reflection on the process of writing. So I want to open it up to folks to ask questions and encourage you to explore whatever you'd like to connect with Chris about, whether it's the boundaries and frontiers and margins or the reflection on the book writing. So if you'd like to ask a question, I encourage you to raise your hand, virtual hand, so we can see you and invite you into the conversation. And you do that by clicking on the reactions button and raising your hand. Does anyone have a question for Chris?
While you're thinking, I can look at these faces and could cite a number of examples. I mean, I get it all right. I see Marcia on how people on this call have shaped their spirit, the project itself, starting with Stan, John, with your Tamina, with your frontiers, in music, and it was a great example of boundary spanning. Marcia, we did a chapter together in your book, if you recall. So go ahead, Marcia.
Thanks, Chris. I guess my question really is, now with that book behind you, and I still feel it's incredibly relevant. And I love what you said about identity, because I completely agree. Are there ways you would, given all the experiences you've had since, is there another book in you, or are there other ways in which you would add a chapter or a different category? There's a lot we're doing now around power dynamics, especially vis-a-vis racism and all of that. And I know culture was one of your boundaries, but I'd love to hear your current thoughts.
Yeah. Oh, there's so much more there, Marcia. I go back and forth between another related idea and then continuing to refine that idea, because I'm also deeply saddened to look at, it's sad when you look at a project that you've committed yourself to, but you look at the state of society as a whole, and since that book has come out, we've only become more polarized, right, and fragmented into our tribes. So I'd say that for me, it's that trade-off between staying with what I know is so needed and looking at it and continuing to explore that, versus other areas that I'm now passionate about. One of them is on multi-generational influences, and how as one of the great parts of longevity is the accumulation of wisdom, and how that wisdom can then be able to help create what are the positive ways to harness that for future generations. So lots to think there.
Thank you.
Doug, please.
So this would be really tactical as far as book writing and such. So you had these 8 years of research, and that, from what I understand, that was part of your day job for CCL, right? And then you had 2 years to write, and I'm still curious whether that was part of your day job.
and how you would describe that versus if some people write as in addition to their normal work life versus whether this was being led by your employer and encouraged by your employer and perhaps giving you some sense of confidence that all this is worthwhile and it's in line with our institute's plan. And how that contrasts to how many people might end up writing as kind of lone rangers. So just your comments on those.
Yeah. So I did have that institutional support, Doug. That made a real difference. I think no matter what, though, and I saw a question about, about the amount of energy that it takes. And I think part of it too is writing the book itself is really just the beginning. And so finding the time to not only write the book, but then to have the time for what comes afterwards, or whatever that project is, because it really is just it's the door opening to a beginning. And whether it means that now you're going to be a traveling book salesperson for the next couple of years, or or you're going to give a lot of talks, or you're going to build community around that book, or you're going to create tools and resources around it. So I think your questions are a really good one to think about time, not only in the context of the writing, but what's to come after it, because the book itself is really just the beginning to what comes afterwards.
Thank you. Dave, I saw your hand pop up.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, boundary spanning. I mean, what an undertaking. And in my career, I tried to do that in my own kind of local way and found it to be some of the hardest work ever. And it's not short-term work, it's long-term work. And how do we develop leaders to do this kind of work? And what are the qualities of that kind of leader?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so back to Marcia's question, if there is a boundary spanning part 2 book, the book itself really focused more on the outer dimensions of boundary spanning, is how do leaders create contexts or environments or containers for boundary spanning behavior to take root and manifest. And so it looks at these practices like buffering and reflecting and connecting and mobilizing and weaving and transforming. So these are spaces or environments that leaders can help create the conditions that increase the likelihood of these intersections being value additive rather than negative. So that was really that focus on the outer work. But the next book would be the inner work, to your point, Dave, of boundary spanning. And it is very much about the ability to see ourselves in the light of others, and for others to see the light of themselves in ourselves. And so it's really the art of it is being able to be both anchored in who you are. I guess the simplest way to say it is the best boundary spanning leaders we think about how they build bridges, Dave, between things, but we have to remember that any well-built bridge needs to be strongly anchored. And so to be able to build those bridges, you also have to do that inner work of your own anchoring. And that the leaders who are most capable of doing that are going to be most likely the ones to be able to build those sense of bridges going forward, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Chris. We have a couple of more hands up here. Greg. Oops, you're muted.
There we go. Chris, great stuff. Good to see you. if it's okay, I'd love to ask you one of my favorite coaching questions, and it's, what would you give yourself the most credit for in writing that book?
Mm. I fully expressed that what I cared most deeply about. Like, I nailed it in terms of the, just that, like that of what I wanted to accomplish. And I know Donna feels this exact same way. We did that together, but oh, I love that question, Greg, because I the work that I do, we so rarely get, a sense of completion or a sense of, something that's permanent. And I have that sense of satisfaction, with that project, that it was the clearest expression of what I really felt about something. And I still feel that way about something. So I love that question. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you.
John Chimino.
Yes.
Hi,
First time
friend.
I heard you, hey there. First time I heard you speak about boundaries as frontiers was up at Silver Bay 15, 20 years ago. And I loved it then, I love it now. A few minutes ago, you began to reflect upon what might be next, and you happened to touch on the word wisdom. And I couldn't help but make a little leap, like a light bulb was going on for me, that this boundary spanning location of opportunity and richness rather than danger has something to do with that subject, that there might be a connection there that for me is just beginning to unfold. I'm betting you might have thought about it some more. Can you offer any thoughts?
Yeah, no, so true. What happens when we cross over into some unknown, or we meet someone who we think we might not have anything in common with, or we travel to a remote part of the world, is we actually find out through that adventure our commonality, right? Our shared stories and everything else. And so how we invite ourselves and how we invite others into those unknowns is you always come back building then a sense of greater connection and a widening of your own story. So it's been so hard for us to be so separated. The interesting thing, we're all connected by 6 degrees of separation, right? The famous experiment, everyone on the planet, but we've lived 6 feet of separation, for a lot of the last couple of years. And so whatever we can do to help ourselves and our friends and family members to take, as you would say, creative leaps, is probably the most important things that we can do.
Seems like the beginning of wisdom to me. Thanks.
Yeah.
We'll take one more question. Sam, please.
Well, Chris, thank you so much. I have to start with wondering how someone in their mid-20s could be so articulate and so wise.
Mid-20s,
Yeah.
not right now.
That's what it looks like to me. Anyway, I would love to just have you react to the thought during your whole talk. I was feeling book as metaphor. Do you have another book inside you? Do you have a melody inside you, a harmony, a phrase, a picture, a building? To sort of to widen the embrace into wider realms that includes everyone, children, and so forth. So maybe would you reflect on that a little bit? Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to answer that question before we leave this call. That one just requires a little more depth than I could just even do off the cuff, Sam. But I will come back to that question. Absolutely. That's a great one for everyone to be thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Well, Chris, you are already singing your song with us today. Just a beautiful expression of your inside, your interior, your experience, your reflection of that time and how it shaped you and who you are, and what a gift. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the only immediate thought that comes to mind is that part of my epitaph we'll read is, we are born dependent, right? We're dependent on many for our just survival, right? And then we achieve our independence. That's a big milestone, to be able to find our own way and our own values and to achieve our independence, but that we have the opportunity now to declare our interdependence. And I think that for me is that's the sort of the epitaph of I think every story I shared with you today, and there are stories about relationships. So I think that's the story for me, is about what happens when we realize we truly are bound all together, and the independence that creates.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. What a beautiful conversation. And we want to welcome this whole community into the reflection, into the conversation, and create an opportunity to really just leap off of what you explored today with us, Chris, and do some thinking ourselves, do some ideating ourselves behind the process of book writing and what it takes. So thank you. And we know you'll be with us during this time as well. So I'm just going to very briefly set up, and then we want to get you all into these smaller group conversations to have that time together. So you're going to be hosted by AMI community authors. There are many people in this group on this call who have moved through that process of bringing a book to life, who will host the conversations. You'll each be working on one of the below "how might we" statements. So there are 5 statements we sort of shaped up based on the preparation here. How might we form or shape the initial idea? How might we work through psychological writer blocks? How might we get inspired to write? How might we get published? How might we market the concept? So Chris, you spoke about the writing act as the beginning and the things to follow, and many things to follow. We wanted to include some of those. And so when you get into your breakouts, your host will just briefly frame the topic and look for someone in the group to please be a volunteer note taker, reporter. This is old school. We don't have Miro set up for this. So whomever takes notes, if you take notes, we would love it if you're willing to share them back through email. We'll publish the ideas that were discussed. But giving you just 10 minutes initially to discuss and generate ideas as a small group behind that, how might we, kind of sharing in your experiences and ideas. And then the remaining time, if there's an idea or ideas you want to dig a little deeper into, feel free to go for it. But as we know with this herd of creative cats, you'll do what you do when you get into these breakouts. So facilitators, good luck to you. And we'll come back into the main room. We are endeavoring to have you choose your own adventure. We haven't done this yet in our community Zooms. We encouraged everyone to please update your Zoom. But in a moment, Sarah will open the rooms. You will see a breakout room bar appear in your Zoom menu bar. If you click on that, you'll see the 5 topics, and you can join the topic that you choose. The only thing that we ask is that you kind of have your top couple in mind, because if you see that there's already 8 or so people in one group, maybe go elsewhere so we can spread ourselves out a little bit. And if you're stuck and can't make your way into a breakout, never fear, we are here to help make that happen. So Sarah, could we open the rooms and give folks the opportunity to jump in? We'll send reminders and bring you back. We'll probably have a little less than 20 minutes here.
All right, you should be able to join, and facilitators, you should already be placed into your specific room.
So folks, if you're still with us, click on the breakout rooms button. You'll see some choices. You can join the group that you'd like to join.
And if you're not seeing this option, you can let us know and we'll help to navigate here.
In your Zoom menu bar, click on breakout rooms. You'll see the different rooms. You can join the room of your choice. I see some folks making their way there. Are any of those left not able to see the option to join a breakout and need some support?
Just found it, so that's
Yay! Yay, Tom! Awesome. How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing fine. It's an interesting session. Thank you for
Good.
letting me join today. So yeah, I'm just
Absolutely.
looking at the rooms here, seeing what I'm going to get myself into, and take.
Wonderful. Enjoy.
Thank you.
John, are you seeing the option? Looks like John just floated off. Michael, how you doing? Can we help you get into a group?
I was just considering.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Sometimes it's hard to figure that out. And Stan, how about you? We see the top of your head. I know you're hours ahead in Turkey. Did you want to join a breakout?
And Danielle, we have just one person in the, and I think that's our facilitator in the writer's block one. So
Okay.
I don't know if we want to.
So maybe what we'll do, well, Sarah, can you just jump in there and then let him know and move him to another group? Just say that that one didn't get picked up.
Sure. Okay.
And then I'll help my dad. So Dad, what group would you like to join? How about, let's see, a group that could use some more folks. Would you like to join Getting Inspired to Write or Marketing a Book? We can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Either one, Danielle, which one?
Okay, maybe we'll throw you into 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to put you into Getting Inspired, okay?
Okay.
Assign to Getting Inspired. You should see a button to join.
Yep, sure. Got it.
Folks will take every last minute here. Hey, Jed. Oops. Here you are. Hey, folks, welcome back. That may have felt shorter than you wished it to be. I'm sure you could have, yeah, look at that. Jim's like, yeah, we were just getting into it. What?
Yeah, we had a mid-sentence like Jessica was right in the middle of it.
We
always need more time. The conversation today has been so deep and so rewarding, and it's hard to make those transitions. We want to respect that we just have a few more minutes left before our end time today. And so with that, we've brought you back. We do hope that the note takers would be willing, if you will, to share in an email back with me. We'll make sure that all of the ideas you discussed behind those topics are shared with this group. That said, we just wanted to open it up for any kind of headline reflections based on your conversations or this experience today. Does anyone have either an idea that surfaced or something that struck you as a reflection on the conversations? Yeah, Marcia.
Yeah, well, our question was, how might we get inspired to write? And I guess the bumper sticker might be, don't wait to get inspired, just write.
Don't wait to get inspired, just write. Yep. I see heads nodding there. A practice, right?
I think
Danielle,
Stan,
I'd like to say this, Danielle. What's the name of the application you and Kent do for me? It's called Writing Something. What's it called?
Oh, yes. I'll find the name of that. It's prompting you with questions and it's putting together a book. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. I'll find the name of that and share with folks. But there is a gift that my brother and I gave my dad for Father's Day that's prompting him to reflect on his life and tell stories. And it's generating
Storyful, Danielle, or something.
Storyful. Mm-hmm.
Storyworks. Yeah, Storyworks.
Other reflections from today, from your breakouts, what were some of the ideas that were surfacing? Yes, Doug.
A couple here. Talk to other people. Do literature searches to find the gaps I can fill. Test the water by writing something small like a blog or an article or social media first. And catch your sparks, especially what I'm passionate about, in a journal.
Ooh, catch your sparks in a journal. Love that, Doug. Thank you.
The bumper sticker, catch your sparks.
Catch your sparks. I think that's the name of your book, Doug.
This is what Mary told Doug. So it was topic number 1.
Catch your sparks. Awesome.
Sparks happen.
Sparks happen.
As long as they don't hit the fan, that's fine.
Other reflections?
Just one more funny one. We were talking about how to market a book and we had all these serious ideas and everything else. And then our last sentence, we were just signing off and Jennifer says, well, actually the best thing you can do to market your book is write a second book. And then we're like, oh my gosh. Oh, that was a funny moment.
Yes, yes. Any other reflections either on the ideas you talked about in your small group or this experience today? Yeah, Jim.
We had, I think we had a good conversation. We were on, I think our topic was getting published. And so, Mary, I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but notions of authority, new ways to publish, new ways of distributing your ideas, taking the traditional publishing route versus kind of, genuinely getting your ideas out there and self-publishing them. So it was in those
I love that.
different areas.
I mean,
Jessica, Mary, is that reflecting Michael, all other people on our group?
Others want to chime in?
It was fun.
It strikes me, Jim, in the same way so many distribution models have been disrupted. I mean, this all has been turned on its head. We can publish in ways that never existed before, and that's
Absolutely.
yeah.
I think a nice thought exercise that is not exactly the way we put it in the group is, what if you didn't have access to the verb publish, but you still had the intention and you still had a reader in mind who could benefit from what you had to offer? What creative ideas might come to mind?
I love it. I love it. Well, with that and the couple of minutes that we have left, we'd love to invite a closing chat. If you've written a book, please share the title of your book in the chat. If you have a book in you that you'd like to share with the group as an intention, please share that in the chat. I love that frame, Mary. If the word published didn't exist, how would you get your idea out there? So we'd love to be able to share back the range of books that this community has put in the world, or any kind of expression that you'd like to share with the group that you've put in the world. And if you have one in you that you want us to be aware of and understand your intention, please share that as well. Jennifer, a beautiful read. Thank you so much. I'm going to just briefly share kind of what's next coming with AMI here. If I can get this to go forward. Oopsie. Well, it went forward and it ended. So I am going to just voice over what's coming up next with AMI. As always, we love to have your feedback. Sarah's going to post, thank you, Sarah. Sarah's going to post the survey link here. We will also distribute it in a follow-up email. Please reflect on today's experience and share your feedback with us. We do absorb that feedback and have it shape the experiences for the community. And we also publish all the learnings that come through there. We have another virtual gathering planned for October 27th. So keep your eyes open for that. If you have your calendars, go ahead. We've got that same slot of 3 to 5 Eastern with a hospitality suite. And then we're hoping to be in Greensboro in the spring of 2023. Sylvester, our board chair, just sent me the possible dates for us to gather at the proximity. We weren't able to work that out for this fall, but we have it very, very clearly in our sights for the spring of 2023. So stay tuned for that. And we just appreciate you all making this time to be and think and learn together. So Sarah, we can just stop the slideshow now. We are, I think, adjourned on time and appreciate all of you. Chris, Jenny, thank you. Breakout facilitator hosts, thank you. Lovely to be with you all. See you again soon. Please do share, note takers, the ideas so we can share them. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Tremaine.